Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 275, December the 8th, 2017, Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, before I get started on today's TowerGate news, I just wanted to respond to one comment. She got it up there pretty quickly. Maura was asking about the most recent revelation of another congressman involved in a sex scandal. This one would be a Republican, which is fine. I have no bias. Any of these guys, Republican or Democrat, I don't care. Any of these scumbags that get caught doing any of this type of stuff should resign. Certainly. So it doesn't bother me at all. But Maura had asked a question about this most recent swamp monster, a Republican swamp monster, about what's going on with him and why he is going to be resigning. And his name is of course, Congressman Franks. Now this one, this one's a real doozy. You're going to like this one. Okay, so the allegation that's being made against him is based on what he's saying is that in this particular case, he had propositioned 2 female staffers in his office to bear a child for him because he and his wife were not able to have children, so he wanted to find a surrogate. So he just thought that he would ask his 2 young female staffers if they would like to be the surrogate. Oh, that's rich, man. Okay, now people do use surrogates for if they have fertility issues and things like that. But typically, there are women who allow themselves to be surrogates, but they're generally not impregnated through fornication or whatever you want to call it, sex. They're generally not impregnated that way. They are actually the male. If he's okay, then the male would submit a sperm sample, and they would a doctor would impregnate the surrogate with the sperm of the male donor, and then she would carry the child to term until it's born, and then she would turn the child over. That's typically how that works when you have a couple that has an infertility problem. Maybe the woman cannot get pregnant. They want kids. The husband and the wife will seek out a surrogate, but it doesn't mean that the wife allows her husband to go bang some woman to get her pregnant. Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way, okay? So the idea that he's using this, Congressman Franks is using this excuse, is absolutely hilarious. I mean, this is good. I gotta hand it to the guy. This is pretty good. So can you imagine? He's a congressman. He's in his office. Apparently him and his wife cannot have children, so he's looking at a couple of his hot young staffers, and he walks up to 2 of them and says, yeah, would either of you be interested in coming in my office and having a little fun for a while so I can impregnate you so me and my wife can have a child? Yeah, I'm sure that went over really well with the 2 young staffers, and I hope everyone is laughing as hard as I am at this particular tale. It's not going to work. I mean, he's obviously going to be resigning, and again, he might be finding himself with his stuff thrown out on the lawn and the locks changed and his clothes covered in urine. Oh my goodness gracious. This is starting, it shouldn't be funny. This is not a funny subject, okay? It's a serious subject. There's a lot of things going on here. But it's almost impossible not to laugh at some of the ridiculous stuff that we see. Even Al Frankengroper's speech today, where he talked about, well, I'm going to be resigning here in a couple of weeks. Nah, he'll be getting out of there pretty quickly, a lot quicker than a couple of weeks. You know, there's a lot of pressure on him to go. But even in his speech, he's like, oh, well, half the things are not true, and the other half, I recall them being different. The fact that they got him red-handed on a picture, you know, trying to grope this journalist's breast, or whoever she was. I think she was a journalist, but you know, the pic, and the things he's written, you know, about wanting to drug and rape Leslie Stahl and all this kind of stuff. He's a sicko, okay? But this kind of stuff almost makes you laugh because it's so ridiculous. that they can actually say this stuff with a straight face, and think that people out in America are actually going to sit back and listen to it and go, oh, okay, that explains it. I guess that makes it somewhat okay. No, no, it doesn't. But they'll say, but politicians, I mean, you got to hand it to them. You know, they do have a way with words, a way of spinning things and trying to get themselves out of the pickles they get themselves into. It's just amazing. You know, just when you thought you've seen it all, you realize there's something else coming down the pipe. So I want to tell you right now about a story that I read, an article I read, I should say, on the American Spectator. Now, I read this last night. That would be Wednesday night. I imagine it is still up on the American Spectator if you want to Google that up and read that article. But I want to tell you what this article is talking about, and it's pretty interesting. It's not that far of a stretch, really. I read it twice. The first time I was like, huh? Let me read that again. And I went back and read it again and thought about it. And essentially what this article in the American Spectator is talking about, and what this writer did, was she took the timeline of events regarding the dossier, the election starting back in 2015, and all these events that played out, and then she plugged Peter Benstrokenis and all the things that he did and was involved in into the timeline. Now, when you do that and you plugged Peter Benstrokenis and his activities into the timeline of events from the fall of 2015 up until Inauguration Day, or when President won the election, President Trump, what you begin to see is what appears to be a possible blackmail scheme. So what the article, I'll sum it up for you, but I recommend that you read the article if you have a few minutes. It's up on the American Spectator. What this article is suggesting, that when you plug Peter Benstrokenis into the timeline and you look at it, as she does in the article, and you can scroll down and you're reading the timeline, and then now you see Peter Benstrokenis plugged in the activities he was involved in, which we know how he was involved in everything, as the number 2 man in counterintelligence. And what it begins to look like in the timeline is it begins to look like that someone knew or found out that Benstrokenis was having this affair with this FBI lawyer who works directly under Andrew McCabe. And it begins to look like possibly someone found out about this affair and then used that against Peter Benstrokenis to get him to do things like change Comey's statement from gross negligence to extreme carelessness, and to all these other things that he did. It fits perfectly in the timeline, and it begins to raise the question that maybe that is one of the things that was discussed on the tarmac between Slick Willie and Loretta Lynch. What if Slick Willie, in that conversation on the tarmac, told Loretta Lynch, hey, we got some intel. You got a guy, the number 2 guy in counter intel at the FBI. He's having an affair with McCabe's, one of McCabe's lawyers. And this could work to our advantage because we could ruin his career. We could destroy all these cases that he's been working on. This could be big trouble for the FBI and certainly the end of Peter Benstrokenis' career. He could even face criminal charges. He's got a lot of problems. Maybe we can coerce him to do a few things for us, and we'll make sure that all this is taken care of and that no one learns about it. You think you could handle that, Loretta? Hillary would sure appreciate it. So what this article in the American Spectator does, plugging Peter Benstrokenis into the timeline of all these things, shows that it is certainly a plausible, I'm not saying this is true, this is what I believe happened, It is just another theory that I think is plausible and should be explored. That it's very possible that someone learned that Ben Strokinus was having this affair, and he may have had other affairs that we don't know about, that we haven't learned about yet. But that he was having this extramarital affair with McCabe's, one of his legal assistants, one of the lawyers that works for him there at the FBI. And if that is true, certainly that would be something that would have been very detrimental to Peter Ben Strokinus. And all someone had to do was whisper in his ear and say, hey, you know what? The Rotten Reverend Clinton is going to be interviewed here in a couple days. It would be really good if she weren't placed under oath. It would be really good if there were no audio or video transcripts of that discussion. It would be really good if her attorney could sit in, who's also a target of the investigation, who, of course, had been granted immunity by, we assume, Mr. Ben Strokinus, along with Comey. It would be really good if all these things could be made to happen, Peter Ben Strokinus, and if they can be, then maybe we won't have to tell everyone about this little affair that you're having. That's a very, very interesting scenario. I recommend you read that daily American Spectator piece. It's quite interesting. And when you see his name and his activities plugged into that timeline, you know, it all makes sense. Would the Rotten Reverend Clinton and Slick Willie be that brazen, that ballsy, that Clinton would actually meet Loretta Lynch, find out where she is, plan the secret meeting on the tarmac, tell her he's got something really important, some information he has to give her, but it's got to be a secret meeting. He meets her there on the tarmac. He gives her this information. She goes back and makes it all happen through her channels. And then a couple days later, Comey exonerates Clinton. And Ben Strokinus gets quietly moved. They were hoping it would be a quiet move and that no one would really find out about it. But apparently the Inspector General did find out about it. And that's why it's public. Not because of Mueller. Not because of the media. Not because of Mr. Sessions or Mr. Rosenstein or Mr. McCabe, despite the fact that all probably but Sessions knew. They did not bring this to light. They did not want us to know that Ben Strokinus was moved and taken off the case. Why? They had an obligation to, and we're going to be talking about that in just a moment. Very interesting. Nunes has stated that he is going to subpoena Mr. Ohr. Now, who is Mr. Ohr? I guess some of you have heard about Mr. Ohr by now. If you haven't, you're going to love this one. Mora, here's another swamp monster that's just emerged from the swamp. He's been pulled out of the swamp. He's been thrown up on the beachhead there for us all to examine. Here we go. We learned today, as in Thursday, that another swamp creature has been outed in the fake dossier corruption scheme. Bruce Ohr, spelled O-H-R, who was the Associate Attorney General who worked in close proximity to Rosenstein, 4 doors down. He had contacts last year, meaning 2016, with Glenn Simpson and Christopher Steele. Since then, he's been demoted. Or met with Steele sometime during the presidential campaign. He also met with Simpson of Fusion GPS around Thanksgiving in 2016 to discuss the dossier and Simpson's frustration with the Trump victory. I smell the Clintons. That's what I smell here. That's the scent of the Clintons. I know it very well. It's a very distinct odor. It's knockdown is what it is, and I know it well. So here we learn that another person involved, deeply involved in these investigations and this whole scam, working very closely with Rod Rosenstein, actually met with Christopher Steele during the presidential election. He also met with Glenn Simpson around Thanksgiving time, just after Trump won the presidency, to talk about the dossier and other related matters. It appears, I think it's exactly what it looks like. And it all looks bad. And I'm going to tell you why here in just a moment. In fact, let's go ahead and talk about that now. A well-respected D.C. attorney, former state attorney, federal prosecutor, named Nick James, laid out an article today where he says that this should be the end of the Mueller investigation. And he lays it out right here. He says this should be the nail in the coffin for Mueller's witch hunt. Under federal law, a prosecutor is required to describe exculpatory and impeachment information to criminal defendants and to seek a just result in every case. The case law is Giglio versus the United States. In that case, we learned that prosecutors are obligated to provide defendants with impeachment evidence, which includes, according to the DOJ's guidelines, evidence of a witness's biases or animosity toward the defendant or toward a group of which the defendant is a member. Peter Benstrokinus should have been revealed to Trump and his legal team. Trump's team may now legally request all documents pertinent to the investigation where Benstrokinus played a role, as well as any other material witnesses or information that may be available and may be pertinent to the case. Let me explain to you very simply what this is saying. Okay, if you are a defendant, a criminal defendant, and let's say the prosecutor is going after you, there's a rule that regards exculpatory evidence. And what this means is that the prosecutor would be required by law to present to you, the defendant, and your attorneys, and the court, any information or witnesses that they have which could bring your guilt into question. This could be the biases of any witnesses. This could be the questioning of the legality of or sanctity of any document. In other words, there could be forged documents. There could be forged signatures. There could be dummied up paperwork that dates and names or events or something were changed to make the paperwork work for the prosecutor's case. So what this writer and this former federal prosecutor is saying is that Trump's attorneys now have the right, because Mueller was under obligation by law to inform Trump and his attorneys about Peter Benstrokinus. They were also required by law to inform Trump and his attorneys about Mr. Ohr and any other documents or evidence they have that could be exculpatory, that could question whether or not the defendant, in this case Trump, is guilty of this Russian collusion. That means that if Trump's attorneys want, and they should immediately, file the petitions with the court, in this case would be with the Special Prosecutor's Office, the Department of Justice, who the prosecutor works under, they could file the paperwork and get it into a federal court, whereby Trump's attorneys would be able to call in and question, interrogate Peter Benstrokenis, his girlfriend, who of course is Andrew McCabe's legal assistant, along with anyone else, including Mr. Ohr. They could look at any documents. They could request anything that would have anything to do with subpoenas that were used to gain evidence, such as wiretaps, seeking any types of financial records, personal records, tax records, any of these things. Every single thing that Peter Benstrokenis, Mr. Ohr, Mr. Muller, or anyone else on his legal team, anything and everything that they have used as evidence or that they have used to acquire evidence can now be scrutinized and questioned by Trump's attorneys, including the interrogation of Benstrokenis, his girlfriend, or Mueller himself, anyone else on Mueller's Hillary donor posse. Now, what would happen if Trump's attorneys were to do this, and they should, is that Mueller would back off and end the investigation. Because bringing all these people, all these witnesses, all this evidence, all the things that Congress wants that they're being stonewalled on, would now have to be provided in federal court. It solves the Congress's problems with being stonewalled, and it also means that the Justice Department and Mueller would be forced to open up completely so the light of day could be shined on him, his team of Hillary donor posse lawyers, as well as all the evidence that's being used, that's being compiled to be used against Trump. Whether that would be for Russian collusion, obstruction, or anything else. Comey would also be able to be questioned, as well as McCabe and everyone right on down the line. Trump's attorneys could turn this into a circus. They could turn it into a circus. And the FBI and the Justice Department certainly, as we have learned already, do not want any of this stuff getting out. Mueller has just opened the door for Trump's attorneys to legally proceed forward to get every bit of it and to force Mueller to drop his case, because what will be learned will be so damaging to the FBI, to the Justice Department, and to Mueller himself, who cares a lot about his reputation, and Comey and all the rest, that they would simply drop the charges. They would walk away. They would let it all go. Mueller would say, okay, I'm closing up shop. That's it. There is no more charges, no more case. What we have is what we have. I'm out of here. That's what would happen, because there's no way that they would open themselves up to Trump's attorneys, who now, by law, because of Mueller's mistake and not telling them about Peter Benstrokenis, that mistake has blown this whole thing up. And if Trump's attorney, Mr. Cobb, is good, and I don't think he's that good, because he keeps telling Trump the best thing to do is to cooperate. Bullshit. But anyway, hopefully Trump's got other attorneys, and I know he does. He's got several. And hopefully one of them understand the exculpatory evidence rule, and they understand exactly what the implications are by the fact that Mueller did not disclose to the court, to Trump, or to anyone else about Mr. Benstrokenis and the fact that he'd been moved out, fired, demoted, whatever you want to call it, kicked off the team. Doesn't matter. That was information by law that Trump and his attorneys and the court should have been made aware of. By law. There you go. Trump's attorneys, you need to be paying close attention. You can shut this whole thing down. Give a press conference tomorrow and announce it. And watch how fast Mueller slams the door and runs out the back door. Hoping to God that they don't come after him for Uranium One, which they will. Anyway. Moving on. The judge who presided over Michael Flynn's case, Rudolph Contreras, has been removed as of today. He was an Obama appointee who was also on the FISA court. Was he removed because he was the judge that approved the FISA warrant? They're not telling us why he was removed, so why was he removed? He's the judge that was going to hear Michael Flynn's case, but he's suddenly been removed without any particular reason. And we know he sits on the FISA court. We know he's an Obama appointee. Is it possible that this judge was the judge who approved the FISA warrant, and that is why he cannot hear the case? I certainly hope that Michael Flynn has got some good attorneys, because his case should be thrown out. Especially what we've learned from Mr. Ben Strokinus. He's the one who interviewed Flynn. He's the one who set Flynn up on this trick interview, which was also very, very, very close to violating legal ethical standards. Michael Flynn should have the charges of his lying to the FBI dropped. They should be dropped. And I think there's a good chance they could be. Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray, the FBI director, was questioned today. I'm sure some of you have been watching those video clips. Well, I got to say that Jim Jordan did a hell of a job. He went after Wray, and we learned a lot about Christopher Wray today. Because what did he do? He defended the FBI. He defended them. And he didn't answer most of the questions that we wanted, especially the one that Jim Jordan asked him. It's the same question that Trey Gowdy asked him. It's the same question that Representative DeSantis asked him. They all three asked him. They asked him the question, did the FBI contribute to any way paying for the dossier, and did they use the dossier to get the FISA warrant? He would not answer the question. He said, I won't speak about anything having to do with the FISA stuff. Jim Jordan comes back to him and says, well, I'm not asking about anything about that. I just want to know about the FBI application to the FISA court. Nothing about the FISA court. I'm talking about specifically your application, the FBI's application. At which point, there was a moment there where Wray came back and said the same thing. Just as I just told you, he said, I'm not going to talk about anything having to do with FISA. At which point, after he finished his questioning, the head of the committee, Mr. Goodlatte, was addressed by Jim Jordan, who addressed Mr. Goodlatte, head of the committee, and said, hey, wait a minute. I am asking for this, and it's my understanding, and he's also a former prosecutor, Jim Jordan, here in the district just north of me. He said, wait a minute. Before we move on, I know I'm out of time, but I want to know if I got this right, because it's my understanding that we have the right in Congress, because we have oversight, responsibility, and authority to request this from the FBI. We're not requesting to see the FISA court documents, although we want that too, and eventually we'll get that probably on the judiciary side. In the Senate, they'll probably get that. But in this particular House proceeding, this is what Jim Jordan asked. And Mr. Goodlatte, head of the committee, also a former prosecutor, and a good one, by the way. Guy knows the law inside and out. That's why he's head of the committee. And he looked over at Jim Jordan and said, you know, you're right. We do have the right to see the FBI's application to the FISA court. We do have a right to see that. At which point, Christopher Wray kind of had a funny look on his face. Had nothing more to say about it. But Christopher Wray, when he was nominated, of course, I did on my TowerGate video that day, we did the bio. We discovered that Christopher Wray comes from, he's a lifelong bureaucrat inside the system, inside the swamp, comes out of the Justice Department. That's where he's been. He's a Justice Department lawyer is what he is. He's part of the deep state, part of the swamp, and we can see now why he's done nothing. Despite the fact that his entire department, just as Trump said, is being turned into a joke. He needs to be cleaning house, and he should have gotten rid of McCabe a long time ago. Why didn't he? Well, today that hearing gave us a lot of insight that Christopher Wray is on the other team. Whether he's trying to defend the FBI just because he thinks that that's the right thing to do or what have you. No, the right thing to do is to clean up the mess. The FBI is completely corrupted. And Christopher Wray is either going to clean it up or be corrupted by it. And his testimony today, that I watched 5 or 6 of the questioners of him, about 45 minutes of his hearings today I watched, and it appears to me that he is in full defense mode, defending the rotten, corrupt FBI. The totally politicized FBI. Defending it and stonewalling on answering questions. I'm telling you, this all thing's gonna... And you have to ask yourself, why is the FBI and the Justice Department stonewalling so bad? Why are they allowing themselves to be drug into these hearings? They can't enjoy that. Why are they allowing themselves to possibly be in contempt of Congress? You can't enjoy that. What is it that they feel they have to try so hard to hide? And what makes them think that they're going to get away with it forever? They're not. Senate Judiciary Chair Charles Grassley has demanded the FBI hand over all of Ben Strokinist's text messages along with the dossier and the FISA communications. That's the FBI application for the FISA warrant. So Grassley is all over that as well. I should also mention that in 2010, Obama told us that manufacturing jobs were never coming back. Congratulations, President Trump. We just learned today that you just set a new record. 40,000 new manufacturing jobs created in 1 month. Thank you very much, President Trump. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you guys.